Hey there. So, this is part 2 of Witchy Wednesday for June 26th to July 2nd, 2019. And in this video, I'm going to go through each of the signs and I'm going to speak to the total solar eclipse that's happening in the sign of Cancer on July 2nd, 2019. Now, if you haven't seen part 1, yet, please go back. Please watch that first before you watch this because that's really going to give you the context, right? The container for all of this. Because if you don't listen to that, this may not make a lot of sense to you, just listening to your sign. But of course, that's up to you. You can choose to do that if you want, your call, right? But I do encourage you to listen to the intro. Now, in this video, I'm going to give you the house that Cancer is sitting in for you. Oh, I might have a visitor here. And that's where this total solar eclipse, oh, hi, Jack, is happening. Here's Jack. He came to say hello. He come to help me. That'll be the house that the total solar eclipse is happening for you on July 2nd. And this will be themes, that you will feel throughout this cycle of eclipses, this set of eclipses in this family of Cancer Capricorn. And I spoke about what that means in the intro part, right? So that's why it's important to listen to that. But I'm also going to just quickly touch on where Chiron is sitting in your chart, because Chiron is making a square, as I mentioned in the intro, to this eclipse. And this is bringing about themes of healing that are connected to our sense of emotional security and our foundations and all those Cancerian themes that I mentioned in the intro. Okay, so that may be triggered for you around this time. So we're going to talk about that. Oh, somebody's very purry here. And again, make sure you listen to your rising sign, also known as your ascendant, right? And then your sun sign and your moon sign for added layers of information. And if you don't know those, then, if you have a reading, then you'll get all that info. Of course, as I mentioned in the first video, links are below to my website and Facebook and Instagram. Or you can draw your chart up online at different places as well. But anyway, okay. Here we go. I'm going to start with Cancer because Cancer, this eclipse is happening in your sign, obviously, right? So you've got the eclipse happening in your first house. And Cancer, regardless, you're going to feel this, but it's going to be particularly noticeable if you have your ascendant, your sun, your moon, or anything of significance around the 10-degree mark of Cancer specifically, okay? But Cancer in general. So this first house, these new beginnings, this sense of what feels like home to me, what feels nurturing to me, what brings me a sense of emotional security? How can I reconnect with that? Is happening regarding your sense of self. That's a pretty big deal, right? Who you are out in the world, or who you put yourself out there as, how you appear to the world, your instinctual approach to things, your physical appearance, your physical vitality, your kind of first experience, right? If we think of the first house as that house of kind of being birthed into the world, that can give you a sense of what this represents for you. So it's really all about you, Cancer. And so the Chiron piece, right? Chiron is sitting in Aries and it's squaring this eclipse. And that is Chiron's sitting in your 10th house. And so you may have these themes of healing and emotional security, foundations, all of this may be connected somehow to your 10th house of authority figures, the father, your career ambitions, your public reputation, the legacy, the public legacy you wish to leave, those kinds of things may be kind of triggered at this time and connected to the eclipse, right? To the first house issues. And so there's an opportunity here for some healing regarding those things at this time, and a fresh start and new beginnings, right? Because this is a new moon. So, and it's always about new beginnings. So that's for you, Cancer. And I'm going to move on to Leo now, where we've got the eclipse happening. Leo, he looks like a lion, doesn't he? The eclipse happening in your 12th house, Leo. And so, oh, you're done now, are you? I've had it. I've had my screen time. So the 12th house is a hidden house, largely. And because this is a solar eclipse, and things tend to be at a solar eclipse, if you heard the intro, you heard me say, the events seem to be more external, right? Plays out on more of an external level. And so this is kind of like things in the unconscious or the subconscious, things behind closed doors, things that have to do with your spiritual life, with your connection to spirit, a higher power, whatever you choose to call it, your self-sabotaging behaviors, or things that have to do with, I've said this every time I bring up the 12th house. I talk to you about the 12th house rules, because it rules, sort of those things that happen in behind closed doors, in solitude, when we're resting, recuperating, those kinds of things. It rules places like, somebody else came for a visit. Rules places like hospitals, rehab centers, recovery facilities, prisons, ashrams, spiritual retreat centers, long-term care facilities, these kinds of things, okay? So this eclipse is taking place in this area of your chart, but it's a solar eclipse. So there may be some external events that come to pass that are related to these themes of emotional security, foundations, the mother, nurturing, all those Cancerian themes that I mentioned in your 12th house, right? So I spoke to you about what the 12th house signifies. And then there is this this Chiron theme, this Chiron energy triggering at the same time here as this eclipse. And that's sitting in the 9th house for you, right? So a sense of healing may come about or be triggered by something that has to do with foreign cultures, your connection to other, cultures, people that are different from you in some way. It can have to do with travel, with your belief system, your philosophies, what you believe about life, the universe, that sort of thing. It can have to do with some kind of higher learning in some way, whether that be college, university, any kind of class or learning that takes place outside of what we think of as like, the earlier education of primary school and high school kind of thing. It can also have to do with teachers, mentors, that sort of thing, right? So the 12th house is the focus here. But the 9th house, what I just spoke about, those themes may factor in to this healing, whatever healing is wanting to happen at this time, right? So that's for you, Leo. I hope that makes sense to you. And I'm going to move on to Virgo now. And Virgo rising, Virgo sun, Virgo moon. The eclipse itself in Cancer is happening in the 11th house for you. And so, if you didn't hear the intro, I really encourage you to go back and listen to that, because I spoke about, when this has happened in previous years and how you can kind of take a look back and get an idea of potential themes that may be playing out at this time, right? I don't want to scare you though. And if something bad happened at those times, that doesn't mean that something bad is going to happen. It just means similar themes play out, right? And so 11th house themes, where the eclipse is happening for you, are things that have to do with the collective, the group, collaborations, friendships, networks, organizations, associations. And it also has to do with your hopes and visions for the future and potential kind of connections that can help you achieve those, right? And so that's where this eclipse is happening for you. So there may be some kind of, new beginnings on offer here. And you may already have a sense of what that is. Or it may, it may come as a surprise. It may play out over the cycle of these eclipses into, the late summer of 2020. But that's the area that's being triggered. And we've also got Chiron squaring the eclipse, right? And Chiron is sitting in your 8th house. And so this is bringing an energy of healing. And it may present a challenge or something that needs to be worked through because that's a square. And that's coming from this house that is a very deep house. It has to do with your intimate connections. It has to do with the vulnerable ways you share yourself, including shared resources, right? So things like taxes and insurance and debts and loans and bursaries and scholarships and oh my gosh, wills, all of those things fall into that 8th house. So do your intimate relationships and your deep psychological processes and, what kind of needs to be healed there, those things that we keep in the dark corners that we don't necessarily want other people to know about. And also has to do with this cycle of transformation, right? Death and rebirth kind of thing. And so something in that 8th house may be also kind of triggered at the time of this eclipse. And it's up for kind of like healing. It wants you to pay attention to that and what needs to be healed there. But ultimately, there is this new opportunity, right, on offer, this new beginning that wants to unfold for you in that 11th house that we spoke about. Okay, so Virgo, that's for you. And I'm going to move on to Libra now, where we've got the eclipse happening in your 10th house, Libra. And so the eclipse in Cancer in your 10th house of worldly ambitions, of your career, of your public reputation, of your the legacy you wish to leave, of authority, whether that be your authority or other authority figures in some way, including the father or father figures. And so there is this new beginning that wants to happen here for you, Libra, with this eclipse in Cancer, this solar eclipse in Cancer. And events may transpire that, allow you to level up in that area or give you an opportunity to take a next step in that area, and to find what feels like home for you in that area, right? Remember, if you listen to the intro, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say that. That because the theme here is kind of like what feels like home, who feels like home, where can I regain my sense of emotional security, that kind of thing. So we've got that. And then in conversation with this eclipse, we've got Chiron sitting in the 7th house for you. And Chiron's all about healing, right? And so, many other things. But, in a video of this length, we're going to use the kind of core of what Chiron is about. And so something may be a challenge to healing. Something that needs to be, some action needs to be taken to resolve this. But that seventh house has to do with your close personal relationships, your one-to-one relationships, whether those be business associates, and it just because the eclipse is in your 10th house, there's a likelihood that that may be the case because that 10th house of sort of your career, right, among other things. And so there may be some kind of like situation going on with somebody that you are connected to through business in some way, that is needing some resolution, healing, a fresh start is on offer. But it could also have to do with your, your significant other. It could have to do with even a rival in the seventh house. But that's kind of what's playing out for you. And those 10th house themes that I spoke about will continue to reverberate throughout the year and throughout 2020 into, sort of late summer and a bit beyond of 2020, because this family of eclipses is happening until then, right? And so that's for you, Libra. And I'm going to move on to Scorpio now, where we've got the eclipse happening in your 9th house. So total solar eclipse in Cancer in the 9th house. So this is about some fresh start that wants to happen, some sense of coming home, of finding home, of connecting to home, whatever home means to you, and your sense of security and safety, right? In the 9th house of travel, usually longer distance travel, of teaching and learning, kind of beyond the high school level, any kind of teaching, learning, of mentors, of your philosophy and belief system, about the world. It potentially could have to do even with some kind of, religious sort of dogma that you've been initiated into, or you've been exposed to, that kind of thing. It could have to do with that even. But that's where this eclipse is happening for you. And so there may be some, like maybe, for example, I just think of a simple example, maybe you're going to get news of some kind of travel that you will embark on that will allow you to reconnect with your emotional security, or that will take you to a place that really roots you and helps you feel grounded and safe and feels like home, or connect to people that feel like your tribe. Like that's a possibility. But then we've got Chiron in the 6th house making a square to this eclipse, right? And that has to do with your day-to-day, right? Your daily grind, your health and wellness routines, how you are in service to others. And so there may be a challenge here to whatever's transpiring in the house of the eclipse, in the 9th house, that needs to be worked through, that needs to be healed in some way, that ultimately, by working through this, though, it allows you to level up, right? To release something. And so that's a good thing. Squares are seen as challenges, but they're very dynamic. There's opportunity for a lot of growth and leveling up when we deal with the issues that a square brings about. So there's that for you, Scorpio. And I'm going to move on to Sagittarius now. And Sagittarius, we have got the eclipse happening in your 8th house. And so the 8th house has to do with intimacy. And I mean that on every level. It is those situations and people that have you feeling, feeling vulnerable, right? In a vulnerable situation. Vulnerability doesn't have to be a bad thing, but leave us kind of feeling, like we need to maybe rely on the other in some way. And so that's why things like shared resources fall into this house. And by shared resources, I mean things like money from business, perhaps a business that you share. It could be clients. It could be taxes, insurance payments, debts, loans, bursaries, scholarships, any of these kinds of things, right? Fall into the 8th house, as do your intimate, like physical relationships, as do deep psychological connections and deep psychological healing, as do this cycle of like transformation, right? The cycle of death and rebirth. And so that's where the eclipse is happening for you. And there is some kind of new beginning on offer for you here, Sagittarius, because the Cancer total solar eclipse is a new moon, right? As we discussed in the intro. And so this is about significant new beginnings when it's an eclipse. So that's on offer for you in some way, and those 8th house matters. And there may be a challenge presented from the 5th house, which is your creative self-expression, your children you work with, what sparks joy for you, essentially. And so some kind of healing, challenge may present itself there because it's Chiron, or opportunity for healing, but you need to take action to resolve the tension or what needs to be resolved, to pick a way, right? To decide on something and move forward with it. When we have a square, it requires action to resolve. It's not like we can just kind of sit back and let things unfold. So that's what's going on for you, Sagittarius. And I'm going to move on to Capricorn now, where we have the eclipse, total solar eclipse in Cancer happening in your 7th house of one-to-one relationships, right? So that's opposite the chart from you. The next eclipse that's happening, the lunar eclipse, is going to be in your sign on the 16th and 17th. This is very relevant for you, Capricorn. These are big times for you, right? 2019 and into 2020 and even 2018. It's been a big, powerful time full of lots of changes and shifts and all kinds of things going on for you. And so this eclipse season is going to highlight all of that. And this specific eclipse in Cancer will be in your 7th house. And so this is an opportunity for new beginnings because it's a new moon in your house of one-to-one relationships. So your significant other, marriage partner, anybody that you have a close personal connection to, really. It can have to do with a business partner even. It can have to do with a rival. But it really can be anybody that you share a close personal connection to. So there is a new beginning on offer. But there may be some kind of a challenge to that with Chiron in the 4th house squaring the eclipse. And the challenge comes in the form of like what needs to be healed. Your deepest wounding kind of thing. In the 4th house of home, family, emotional security, it's Cancer's house. Your foundations, the mother wound in some way. So these two areas are kind of challenging each other, but addressing the challenge can allow you to really level up and move to the next level and have a new beginning in some way. And so that's for you, Capricorn. And we're going to move on to Aquarius now, where we've got this total solar eclipse in Cancer happening in your 6th house of the daily grind of your health and wellness routines, and that can have to do with people. I often find this is reflective of people that work in health and wellness as well, because that's what you're doing on the day-to-day, right? Your day-to-day tasks involve health and wellness in some way, so it can have to do with that, how you are in service to others. I often think about nurses for some reason when I think about this house, and it is, the 6th house is the house of Virgo, and Virgo is associated with healing as well. So anyway, that's a bit of an aside, but so 6th house, those things I mentioned, it can even have to do with small pets, the 6th house. It can have to do with relationships that are a bit hierarchical, like unequal, right? I've mentioned before, teacher and student, employee, employer, that sort of thing. It can be reflected in the 6th house as well. But that's where the eclipse is happening for you. And so some new beginning is on offer for you. And some events may transpire that lead to that new beginning. in that area. And there may be a challenge in some way coming from the third house, which is where Chiron is sitting. Chiron, who is speaking to our deepest wounding, our spiritual wounding, what needs to be addressed regarding healing. Specifically, Chiron sitting in Aries, the healing of our identity in some way. And it's sitting in the third house of your communication, of like communications and mobility almost, right? I've heard it referred to as that recently. So this is like your day-to-day communications that go back and forth, how you communicate, your self-talk, your it can be peers, siblings, neighbors, cousins, those people in your immediate environment, your daily commute. So, which is like sort of shorter distance travel and trips. That is where this Chiron energy is squaring the eclipse for you. So these two things can be squaring off right now, these two areas a little, and just asking for like some attention, like what needs to be healed here? What needs to be addressed? What's presenting a challenge that you need to take action to resolve. And so I think we'll leave that there for you, Aquarius, and we will move on to Pisces. And Pisces, this total solar eclipse in Cancer, which is also a water sign, just like you, is happening in your 5th house. So Cancer trines Pisces, just like it trines Scorpio, right? The water houses, the houses that have the same element, they trine each other. And a trine is a conversation of ease and flow. So potentially this could be not quite so jarring for you, Pisces, as it may be for some other signs. But again, that totally depends on what happens in your own personal chart, right? What's happening. But the 5th house is where the eclipse is happening for you. And this has to do with your individual creativity, your creative self-expression and creative projects. Not so much collaborations, that's the 11th house, but more along the lines of, your individual creative self-expression. It has to do with children and the children in your life in general. It has to do with what sparks joy for you and how you have fun and what brings pleasure. Okay, so some new beginning wants to happen for you and is on offer for you at the time of this eclipse, which is a new moon on steroids, right? So it's good to initiate a new beginning, but events may transpire that just, present this to you. And there may be a bit of a challenge that happens in relation to Chiron in the 2nd house, because Chiron in Aries in the 2nd is squaring this eclipse for you. And so it's like the healing of your identity in relation to your self-worth, your values, your material resources, those kinds of things are 2nd house related. And so those two areas, the 5th house and 2nd house, are looking to have some resolution, right? That may be brought to light at the time of this eclipse. And so with a square, it requires some kind of action to resolve and to resolve that tension. And so just keep that in mind, okay, Pisces, for you. And I'm going to leave that there for you. And I'm going to move on to Aries, where we have the total solar eclipse in Cancer happening in your 4th house. And the 4th house is the natural home to Cancer. And so, this is all about home, family, emotional security. It's kind of like a double dose of Cancer energy for you at the time of this eclipse. Place of living, our roots, our ancestry, these kinds of things, right? So the eclipse is happening in this house, offering some kind of new beginnings and triggering some new beginnings in this area of life. And then there is Chiron sitting in the 1st house for you, because Chiron is in your sign right now for the next still like 7 years. And that is, triggering the healing of the identity in some way. And so that's the house of the self, of your physical vitality, of your instinctual approach to the world, of how you appear to the world. you know, these kinds of things. And so these two houses here, the fourth and the first, there's some kind of challenge happening between these two that is requiring your action to resolve. And in doing so, this allows you to take the next step, to move to the next level, to get closer to that sense of what and who feels like home for you. Okay, as I spoke about in the intro, and if you didn't listen to the intro, I really, really encourage you to do that and go back to part 1. Okay, so that's for you, Aries. Thanks so much. And I'm going to move on to Taurus now. So Taurus, we have the total solar eclipse in Cancer happening in your 3rd house of communications and mobility. I wish I could remember where I heard somebody else refer to it as that, but it resonated with me. So, and that's because, you know, it has to do with our sort of immediate environment and how we move around in our immediate environment, short trips, short commutes. And it even, you know, rules like how we do that. Because it's the natural, Mercury is the natural, you know, is at home in the 3rd house there. And Mercury is about, you know, how we kind of go back and forth, move back and forth, that kind of thing. And also about communications, right? How you communicate, your communication style, the messages exchanged back and forth, teaching, or not so much teaching, speaking, writing, you know, any kind of communicating like that. And your immediate environment and the people in your immediate environment, like your peers and your siblings and your cousins and your neighbors and that sort of thing. So Taurus, that's where the eclipse is happening for you. And there is a new beginning on offer for you in regards to the themes surrounding this 3rd house as it relates to what feels like home, what brings you a sense of emotional security and safety, all those Cancerian themes that we spoke about in the intro, right? And so some new beginning wants to happen for you here and allow you a greater sense of aligning with your foundations and what really allows you to feel that sense of close connection to you know, home, family, tribe, emotional security, safety, those kinds of things. But that's being challenged a little bit by Chiron in the 5th house. And Chiron is sitting in your 12th house. That's where Aries is for you. And this is, it's a need to heal the identity. That's Chiron and Aries, right? And for you, that is on a spiritual level. It's on an unseen level because that's the 12th house. It's a hidden house. It has to do with your connection to spirit, your connection to a higher power, whatever that is to you, your higher self. It has to do with even your dreams. It has to do with how you spend time in solitude and reflection, how you recuperate, you know, and rest. And it can have to do with your those ways that you sabotage yourself that may be coming from a very unconscious place. It can have to do with even, you know, dealings with facilities like that are behind closed doors, that are things like hospitals and hospices and long-term care facilities and rehab facilities, treatment centers, addiction centers, prisons, ashrams, spiritual retreat centers, all of those things, okay? And so there is a challenge being presented here between the 12th, from this Chiron in the 12th house to the where the eclipse is happening in your 3rd house. And a square is something that requires our attention and our action to resolve. And so if you're ignoring something there and kind of sweeping it under a carpet and pretending that it's going to go away, then I suggest that perhaps now is a time to really deal with that, to take some kind of action, right, to resolve that. And have this fresh start and this new beginning that wants to happen for you in the 3rd house, which is where the eclipse is happening for you, Taurus. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to, last but not least, in this case, Gemini. And so Gemini, we have the total solar eclipse in Cancer happening in your second house. And this has to do with your resources, your personal resources. When I see resources, we often relate that to material possessions, specifically money. And that is true, but it also has to do with your actual material possessions, but your time and your energy as well. Those are all resources, right? Your personal resources. The second house also has to do with worth, what you value, your self-worth, very much so. And your value system, you know? And so this new beginning, the eclipse is bringing about a new beginning in this area for you. And that will allow you or encourage you to connect with a greater sense of emotional security, of feeling safe, of feeling nurtured, and connection to tribe, to family, these kinds of things, right? A sense of home. And that is being challenged a little bit by Chiron in the 11th house. And Chiron is sitting in the 11th house in Aries, where it's working on healing your identity with regards to groups and associations and friendships, and your hopes and dreams for the future. And so these two areas of life are kind of playing off each other right now. They're challenging each other at the time of this eclipse, challenging you to resolve something regarding, this and what needs healing here. And when we take action to resolve it, then we can kind of, right? We feel less stuck. We can move forward and level up, kind of thing, and engage this new fresh start in this second house that I spoke to you about. And so if you have not listened to the part 1 video, which is the introduction that will give you all the context for everything I've said here in terms of the houses, then please go back and listen to that. And so I'm going to leave it there for you. Once again, 3 weeks in a row, we have part 1 and part 2, because I have a lot to say lately and there's a lot going on. And so whether or not that continues to be the case moving forward, I'll just see. I'm just going to go with it. That's me and my mutability, I guess, my Pisces sun and Virgo rising, right? So we're just going to go with the flow here and see how things unfold. And I wish you all the best during this eclipse. Please let me know what's happening for you, what's playing out. I'd love for you to leave me a comment below or connect with me, via email at my website or social media or what have you. Okay, so take good care and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.